Hello and welcome back to my channel and to my Fighting Fantasy Gamebook retrospective. And I just want to start by saying a big thank you to all the people who commented on my last video and encouraged me to keep going with this retrospective. I didn't know whether to keep going with it or not, and I found your comments really inspiring and helpful, so thanks very much. So today I'm going to be doing two books. I'm going to be doing two books for every video from now on. And I'm doing book 25, Beneath Nightmare Castle, and book 26, Crypt of the Sorcerer. So we're going down into the earth in both of these books. Now, the first of these books, Beneath Nightmare Castle, brings a new writer to the series, Peter Darville Evans. Now, that name may not mean much to Fighting Fantasy fans, but if you're a Doctor Who fan, it means quite a lot. Peter Darville Evans was quite a big figure in Doctor Who in the 1990s. He was the guy behind Virgin Publishing, and they produced a whole series of new adventures for Doctor Who when Doctor Who finished on TV. So he kept the flame burning through the 90s, if you like. So he was quite a significant figure in Doctor Who publishing. Before that, he'd been publishing erotic fiction. There you go. But here he is, starting out. And when I bought this book as a teenager, I'd never heard of Peter Darville Evans. This was before the Doctor Who stuff. So it's interesting to go back and revisit it now. What does he bring to the table? Not much, to be honest. Actually, what he brings to it is two things. First of all, there's a bit of mean-spiritedness. You know, right in the comments. This is the first book I remember where it says, "Don't cheat." And then the book is quite hard. It's quite nastily hard. Early on in the early stages, you have to keep rolling dice 8 times and making sure it's beneath your stamina or something. You know, it's quite hard to get going. And you die all the time. You keep just turning around corners and dying and stuff. I don't like that very much. To be fair to Peter Darville Evans, this book, it's a kind of typical, you're fighting off some necromancer who is coming to life underneath this crypt. Incidentally, is it me? Or is the necromancer called Jackass? Anyway, so you're fighting this necromancer. One of the some good things about this book is, I think it's very heavily influenced by Creature of Havoc. So there are multiple ways you can get down into the crypt. And you don't necessarily need all the stuff to get through. There's different endings. You know, you can sort of chase the female enchantress back into the mirror realm. You know, the mirror realm, that's also from Creature of Havoc. You know, you can chase her back, but you've only sort of paused. You know, really you have to go into the mirror realm and defeat Jackass, the necromancer. So that's quite interesting. There's multiple, safe paths. There's multiple ways of completing the mystery. But I have to be quite honest, I found myself forcing my way through this. I didn't really enjoy it. I couldn't get into the storyline. I found it quite abrasively written somehow. The second thing about this book is that it's clearly influenced by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I've been thinking about that a lot, I'll admit, because I've currently been rereading the Necronomicon. There it is, the book, the Necronomicon. It's not the Necronomicon itself, as mentioned in the stories. It's just a collection of his tales. But what a wonderful, big black book of death, Necronomicon. And, Lovecraft is full of these kind of ancient gods who are all tentacly and blobby and ugh. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of blobby, horrible creatures and slime and stuff in this adventure. So there's a bit of Lovecraft, there's a bit of Creature of Havoc, it was okay. I just couldn't get into the storyline. It didn't capture me at all. What did capture me about this book, though, is the artwork. It's almost worth getting this for the artwork alone. Now, the front cover is by Terry Oakes. Now, it's a very good cover, this kind of nightmare castle at night with this woman coming towards you like this. But when I first saw this cover as a teenager, bear in mind this was the 80s, this cover struck me as really disco. It was like the Eurovision Song Contest. It was like, who's that girl? Warrior queen, she'll kill you clean. There's kind of something like disco-y about it. It's supposed to be nightmarish, but I don't think it really is. What I also really love is the interior artwork, which is by Dave Carson. The artwork in this really captures the Lovecraftian nature of Peter Darville Evans' prose. And it's really lurid and almost insane. And there's loads of horrible tentacly things and blobby things and nightmarish dogs with weird snouts. I absolutely love the artwork in this book. It really gives the nightmare feel that this book was looking for, and which sometimes I think it lacks a bit in the prose, especially in the early scenes in the town. But the artwork is fabulous. So adventure, brilliant artwork. Now, our second book today sees the return of Ian Livingstone. Hooray! He's back. And it's not a sequel, it's a new adventure. And in this one, I think he goes back to the spirit of his early books, City of Thieves and Death Trap Dungeon. And it's a very jolly adventure. It does all the sort of things that Ian Livingstone does. It has a very straight path, which is clearly defined. But there's good finding of objects which come into use later on in the book, and sometimes you find an object and you wonder what use it is, and then you find out that it could be bad or good. You might be walking through a cemetery and you're wearing a bone talisman that animates some zombies to come out at you, whereas otherwise you just walk through it fine. So it's well thought through, it's well created. It's not as complex as Steve Jackson's books, but it's jolly and it works. And you have to, meet up with people. You meet up with Sim, who's basically Robin Hood, and a dwarf. And make sure you listen to all the dwarves' boring chatter. It comes in very useful later on. You also meet up with Yaztramo again, although this time he's not very generous. You remember in Forest of Doom, he gave you that whole menu of items you could buy for him. You don't get much from him in this one, just some healing potion. That's no good, is it? So it also has that thing where, Ian Livingstone doesn't like to set his adventures in one place. So you go through the Moonstone Hills, then you go back to Yaztramo, then you go off in a balloon, shades of Andrei Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev, for film fans out there. That scene is very sort of like that first scene in Andrei Rublev. You know what, though? What sort of slightly irritated me is the text says, you turn round the corner and see this amazing new invention. There's a balloon. Well, if it's a new invention, you don't know what a balloon is. I know that's picking hairs, but there it is. And you go off in the balloon, and then the last part of the adventure is in the Crypt. Now, the Crypt, I don't know whether this was intentional in Ian Livingstone's part, I'm sure it wasn't, but basically, it's a dark slit in the earth with noxious vapours coming out. You're essentially walking down into a great big arse cleft. Anyway, and what's interesting about this little twist is don't take your friends. Disguise yourself, but don't take your friends down, because otherwise you'll be deaded. That's a bit cruel. The ending's a bit cruel, I think. But you know what, right? This kind of revived the enjoyment of City of Thieves and Death Trap Dungeon. I'm not sure it's up to their level, but I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It was better than Trial of Champions. There was a lot to do. I enjoyed the sort of going through the different areas and meeting up with different people. There's some good enemies. I like the Rad Hulks, these beasts that get more energy and grow in size when they're, exposed to rays. All that sort of thing. There's some good monsters. There was the harpoon flies, all that sort of stuff. And my favourite thing in this book is one of the first thing you have to do, the first key thing you have to do. It's a bit like the Lady in the Lake in King Arthur. You have to go to this lake. And this guy, he was defeated by the necromancer, the sorcerer, and he was turned into a skeleton. So what did he do? Like all good skeletons, he went off into the hills, found a lake, built a raft, and he's on this raft with this sword, and you've got to get this sword off him. And I just love the idea of this skeleton, year in, year out on his raft. Here we are, another bloody day on the raft. Same bloody hills, fog as well. Oh, I don't know. So, and then, you're in danger of becoming that skeleton if you're not careful. So there's lots of good elements to it. Artwork, the classic Les Edwards cover, I really like that cover. I especially like those flying skulls behind them coming out of the sarcophagus. I think that's rather good. The interior artwork is done by John Sibbick, who previously had done the excellent cover for Masks of Mayhem. I don't know whether it's this edition, but the ink is very, very heavy. And to me, that kills some of the atmosphere. Look, it's very heavily inked. It's very dark, and that kills some of the detail and some of the atmosphere. It's good artwork. There's some entertaining images here, but it lacked the atmosphere, the sort of weird, mad luridness of Beneath Nightmare Castle. Incidentally, right, I'm quite pleased with myself. I picked up on all the Lovecraft references in this book. Just before I did this video, I did a bit of research. Oh yeah, you get what you pay for on this channel. And I found out that Dave Carson, who did the artwork, is best known for, guess what? his illustrations of H.P. Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu. Not bad, eh? Not bad. Quality reviewing here. Anyway, so that's those two books. The first one, so-so. The second one is a good, decent Ian Livingstone adventure. Thanks very much.